Welcome back to another Blue Jackets game reaction. Game 24, where Columbus took a tough loss in Columbus to the Canadiens by the final score of 4-2 last night. We'll also get into some Kent Johnson talk as well in this video. And while it wasn't the worst third period effort we've seen from the Blue Jackets last night, Montreal did seem to have an extra gear that the Jackets just couldn't find. There were no lineup changes besides Elvis Merzlikins going back into the net, and it was the Jackets' third game in 4 nights, which isn't a valid excuse for losing steam in the third. That's something that every NHL team has to deal with. You do have stretches of the schedule like that for every NHL team, but that is a physical reality for the team. And I would say that the Jackets do have depth pieces that they could throw in there, but I'm not sure if Matthew Olivier coming out for another fourth liner would have made that much of a difference in this one, or Andrew Peeke coming in for another defender on the right side. Probably if Andrew Peeke comes in, Jiricek would have gone out, and that's not something I want to see either. So I'm really not sure how to avoid the result you had last night. I guess that's just what happens when you let a team like, Montreal Canadiens are definitely going to play hard every period, and when you don't match their intensity in the third, in a tie game especially, that's going to happen. There was a wrinkle in this loss, however. It wasn't quite like all the other ones. The Jackets didn't just lose one lead after going up 1-0. They lost 2 leads, as they also went up 2-1 in this game. Also kind of a topsy-turvy game in the fact that the bottom 2 lines of Eric Robinson, Sean Kuraly, and Justin Danforth, and you also had that third line of Chinakhov, Sillinger, and Voronkov, they were much more productive at 5-on-5 than your top 2 lines that you would think would contribute more of the scoring or more of the high danger chances with that. You have the Gaudreau, Jenner, and Marchenko line. Then you also have Laine, Fantilli, and Texier. The bottom 2 lines were a lot more dangerous on the ice than the top 2 lines, and that showed in how Pascal Vincent distributed the ice time late in that game. But in the end, goals allowed late yet again put the Blue Jackets behind and were their undoing in this one. The news from today, though, is that Damon Severson was put on IR and Kent Johnson has been called up. He wasn't playing at center in practice, and Pascal Vincent pretty much said that Kent Johnson at center is something that they might try eventually in the season. Which I guess if you want him to be a center, he's going to have to play center at the NHL level at some point. You sent him down to Cleveland and he got big minutes playing top line center there. You might as well give it a shot in the NHL. What's the worst that could happen is that maybe he has a rough game and maybe the Jackets get a bad result because of it. My thinking there is that is a risk that Pascal Vincent was very willing to take with Patrik Laine, where yes, last season he got a couple games in at center and he had mixed results there. Using him at the center position this year didn't really go all that well. That was definitely an unknown. You're definitely taking a bit of a leap of faith in Patrik Laine at the center position. I'm not sure what the hesitancy is to put Kent Johnson there at this point. Maybe it's just because Patrik Laine is a much bigger human being than Kent Johnson is right now, obviously, because Patrik Laine is like 6'5", and he does have some weight on him. Kent Johnson, a bit shorter, doesn't have exactly the same amount of weight that Patrik Laine has, but I mean, at this point with the Jackets the way they are, and I know they've had some better recent results, but with where they are in the standings and how they are at the points, you might as well try to do something with Kent Johnson besides just calling him up and putting him back on the wing. But getting back to the game from last night, first period going without score. Both teams having some decent chances, both Elvis and Montembeault for the Canadiens up to the task early on. Columbus has actually been, I think, fairly consistent starting the game off well. There haven't been too many games where I feel like the Jackets have been caught by surprise by their opposition or have been completely outworked in the first period. It's been in those later times in the game where maybe there is some physical wear and tear, or there's just some more pressure with there being only a limited time left in the game. That's when the Jackets have faltered this season, and no different in this one against the Canadiens. The second period is when the scoreboard would start to get lit up a bit more. Early in the period, Kuraly and Kovacevic drew coincidental minors, setting up a 4-on-4. That's really the only skating penalties that Wes McCauley and his crew called all night. They did have a delay of game penalty against Montreal in the third period, but that's one that you kind of have to call. As far as like hooking or tripping or anything like that, it was basically just those coincidental minors, and everything else was fair play. They swallowed the whistles a lot in this one, and there were definitely plenty of opportunities for infractions on both teams, but again, the refs pretty much taking the play on it approach in this game. And on that 4-on-4, Patrik Laine had a tremendous play, great unassisted goal where he created a turnover. He turned on the Jets, no pun intended, and he snuck a shot past Montembeault to make it 1-0 for Columbus. And Patrick Laine had a bit of a rough game after that, but that's something we'll get to after this recap here. But Provorov, he had a turnover that led to some Montreal zone time. Newhook had a shot that went off the pipes, but a bouncing puck would find him again in a good position, and he would fire one past Elvis. No mistake on his second chance to tie it at 1. But Columbus would stick with it, though. Jackets getting a rush that ended up with 4 Jackets down with the Montreal net to just 1 Canadian defender. Those numbers definitely favor the Blue Jackets, and Chinakhov had enough time to gather the puck and elevate it past the goaltender pretty much into a yawning cage there. So the Jackets got back up 2-1, probably feeling pretty good midway through the second period. The goal would be to try to get to second intermission with, at the very least, this 1-goal lead. But then the Canadiens would get a 2-on-1 rush. Patrick Laine would take a little stumble trying to get back on defense, and Dvorak would lead the 2-on-1, getting a shot on Elvis, who would try to cover up, but the puck would slip past him, find Caulfield, who put it past a sprawling Merzlikins, so the game was tied up at 2, and that's where the game would be ending up after the end of the second period. So third period, whole new game, you have to win the third period, and again, the final 20 minutes I don't think it was completely terrible for the Blue Jackets, but the Canadiens definitely felt like they were the more urgent team on the ice. They were pressuring for a bit more. The shots were pretty even as far as the shots on goal, but I feel like the Canadiens definitely tilted momentum in their favor, although it did remain scoreless for most of the third period, thanks in part to the Jackets getting a power play chance after that delay of game call, and the power play just a little bit rough, where this is where Laine's game started to be noticeably off, where he was just missing pucks that were flung around the boards, and so the Jackets had to clear a couple of times because of that. And I also don't think it helps that Patrick Laine is kind of off of his natural position on the power play, where usually he's kind of in that Alex Ovechkin spot in the left circle, but when him and Gaudreau are on the same unit, they seem to favor Gaudreau on that left side, and it's just been a bit of a thing where it seems like Patrick Laine just doesn't quite fit on the right side as well as he does on the left, and I feel like Johnny Gaudreau can make anything happen from anywhere, where if you're going to play into Laine's best strength, that's him shooting from that left circle. I feel like that's where you should put him on that top unit if he is going to be there. But he just missed a couple pucks that were coming to him. No excuses for those. That's just bad. And just when you're starting to think that the game was heading into overtime, Matheson took a shot from the point that went off Armia and past Elvis. So a 3-2 lead for the Canadiens, leaving the Jackets with a little less than 3 minutes to try to tie it. And during that 6-on-5, when the Jackets went empty net, there was another Laine miss in the Montreal zone. Canadiens were able to get it into the Jackets' end with the net empty, and Lindstrom finishing off the game there. So a discouraging loss for the Jackets. Obviously, they had gotten some momentum back against Boston. Maybe a lot of that was Boston just being off of their game a little bit, slumping a little bit heading into their game against Columbus. But you definitely wanted to see the Jackets build on that dominant win over Boston, see if they could, and they did some good things in this one. They had a couple leads, but it is kind of what we've seen a lot from the Jackets lately. It's just that this one there's been a few wins to buffer these kind of efforts where, during that 9-game losing streak, they'd get a lead and they'd squash it over and over and over again. Now that there's been a few wins, this one doesn't sting quite as much, but it is still a very discouraging trend of the Jackets to have the effort to get those leads, but just not be able to hang on to them for one reason or another, whether it's a bad turnover or allowing a 2-on-1 or the Canadiens definitely earning those goals. They did enough to come back and win the game, obviously, but Columbus does have to be able to really be able to keep their foot on the gas when they get a lead in these situations. But that'll do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did make it this far into it, leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed it and you'd like to see more like it. I cover a lot of teams from Ohio that I like. Maybe you like those videos as well. But once again, thank you for watching, and I will see you at the next one.